Thank you for joining us on this Tuesday evening on Bishop Larry Ward Live, BLAW Live, we call it. And we're here as we've been doing these programs for a little while now because we want to encourage, inspire, and we also want to educate you. We want to just give you some good things to think about, things that are happening in the lives of God's people. So I these type of discussions with those who really have good stories or they have good areas that they're working in, things that they're doing to actually inspire and encourage people. And so I hope that you have been encouraged by a number of the BLAW Lives if you've been watching them. If you are here for the first time, welcome. Thank you for joining us. You can share with somebody. And also want to invite you to ask questions. You put your questions in the chat box and we'll get back to you. Certainly we'll answer those questions. So tonight, we're going to just talk with Mr. Devon. Let me first introduce her to you. Minister Devon McCarley is on our leadership team, on our pastoral team at the Abundant Life Church. She's also a senior director of the Welcome Services for the Boston Public Schools, where she oversees registration and she oversees assignment for prospective families, including Boston exams. And these services there to provide families throughout the city of Boston and those children who are in the Boston public school system with good quality education and connection to schools that will cause our children to do well. And also she is over welcome centers located throughout the city of Boston. Actually, she's over 4 of them. So we want to welcome her. And I want you to welcome Minister Devon McCarley. Hi, Devon, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. And then so we're here tonight to talk about Boston public schools. And when we start thinking about our children and the families who have been impacted with this pandemic, it was back in March 17th of 2020, which is last year, that Mayor Martin Walsh announced that the city public schools were going to close for over a month in an effort to keep students and their families and the staff safe. But we know now that right now, as we're kind of sped up in time, that we are in a space now where young people are going back. So what was your first reaction when it comes to this? You know, if you kind of think back, when we kind of came into the time of pandemic, what was your first reaction? And what was that, what did that mean for the Boston Public Schools?
So, yeah, so we've come across our 1-year mark. And when all of this happened, I think our reaction was very similar to a lot of other people, where we had no idea that it was going to be this full year plus. So when we heard the news, of course, you know, making sure that we do what's right by our kids and wanting them to be safe. But between the schools as well as our, you know, even our offices, our administrative buildings, when we shut down, a lot of people just grabbed a few items thinking that it would be for, you know, a couple of weeks, maybe a month. But I think that was kind of our initial reaction, you know, thinking and hoping that this was just something that was very temporary and we could then in turn return back to schools and work shortly after. But of course, we know that did not happen.
Yeah, it's surprising to everybody. You know, surprising to me. I thought, you know, maybe a couple of weeks.
Right.
And now it turned into a whole year. And we're still working our way back, even after 1 year of the pandemic. So what was your role in coordinating the efforts? And I know that, you know, as the Boston Public Schools were going into remote, what was your role during that time?
So what I do, I can talk about that in kind of 2 phases. On one side, because I oversee registration assignment, we are servicing our families. So essentially, our main role was to switch our services from in-person to remote. So as you mentioned earlier, we assist our families in registering for school, and then we make sure that each child has an assignment. And so we needed to quickly pivot in order to move from a system that was solely in person. We did not offer, phone services, remote services, nothing virtual. And we needed to, it's funny because when this happened, you would have seen all of us, some of us had laptops, some people didn't. So you would see people packing up desktops and having to go home so that we could figure out how we were gonna work remotely. So the first week, it actually took us about a week to transition, having to set up our computers, work on having the network connected so that we could actually switch to the cloud to be able to take phone calls via computers and be able to service our families, let the families know how we've switched, letting them know our physical location had closed, but we're still servicing them via the phone, etc. So on that end, when it came to registering families, that was definitely an interesting transition, but we were able to do it in about a week and a half, which I think was really good given our situation. And then on the other side was when it came to virtual learning and just the understanding of what this looks like for the district as a whole, our assignment team, we work with really looking at how that affects, seat capacity within the classrooms. Of course, everyone was remote. So overall, it was just a matter of really trying to do assessments and simulations and figure out, what this transition looks like for our students. And we were semi-involved in that in the beginning. A lot of our work is impacted as we try to transition students back into the classroom, either, the hybrid versus some people may have heard in the news around the commissioner who wants schools open 5 days a week for in-person learning. So all of that affects our department when it comes to really looking at seat capacity within the classroom and how we assign kids back into the schools.
Well, it sounds like there's a lot of moving parts.
Absolutely.
A lot of moving parts. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to families, when it comes to handling school choices, is there a lot of uncertainty right now? And I know as students are coming in and, they're coming into the school system and they certainly want to choose their schools and hopefully they can choose their schools. How does that impact your work, as we're slowly coming out of the pandemic, kids are going back to school, seating capacities and all of that? How is this impacting you and impacting families?
Yeah, so it impacts everyone in different ways. In regards to our families, so when we talk about just the registration side and our families who are just trying to make decisions, it's difficult because it's really case by case, right? You have families who have just different dynamics, two-person households, single household, you got grandparents, versus parents, people who are working, not working. And so all of these different factors play a role into families' decision-making. And so on our side, we're experiencing, as of right now, a decline in our enrollment, which a lot of schools are, the charter schools and different things. So we're experiencing that. And so it's kind of twofold. Again, one is just trying to figure out what's happening within the city and the trends. As a result of the pandemic, there are a lot of families who had to move and kind of double up with other households. So there's just been a shift that we're trying to understand, and that affects our enrollment. Then the other side of it is what we're calling the delayed decision, where you have families who were going to register, but as you mentioned, there's just so many questions that they have, and trying to, even on our side, figure out, what does schooling look like? Because, for the last year, any of the kids who were general education had not been in school yet. So we had opened up the doors for some of our students who had more of a high priority need, some of our special education students, et cetera. So there was some of our students in the school, but for the most part, for general education, we had been remote. And so this past month, we've started bringing in kids kind of week by week by grade levels. So a lot of what we call the delayed decisions is because families needed to get a grasp and an understanding of what will this look like? What does transportation look like for my children? What does seating arrangements look like? Is it safe? All of these questions that you should be asking. And so we've been working hard on this and of really trying to make sure families understand what's going on, to understand that we are doing everything, to make sure that the environment is safe for kids, et cetera. So it's just, there's so many unknowns that just, it makes decision-making really hard. And the same thing has happened on our end. Because of the moving parts, it's not as simple as, let's bring the kids back. We would love to, but there's so many nuances with that, and making sure that we can do that safely.
Wow. So what would you want parents to know? And, they want their child to get back in school. Parents who are registering their children for school, what are some of the important things that you want them to know that they may not be thinking about because they're trying to say, okay, can I get my kid into school? What kind of challenges am I going to have? What would you say to them to make them a little bit at ease?
So the first thing that I would say, as I just mentioned, the district is really doing everything that they can to make sure that there is a safe environment. We care about the kids, so we are not in the business of putting kids in danger. We have heard, different questions and things that of course have come along around, air ventilations and school buildings and those types of things. And there are different reports and things you can find on our website around the testing, with air purification. We're abiding by all of the guidelines, and we work very closely with the Health Commission in the city of Boston to really make those decisions around just the levels, the numbers that are happening, and as they decrease and increase. And I know that it can be frustrating for parents, but if you look at the positive side of it, that if you really think about the safety of the kids, that's why originally we had a plan to reopen last fall, and we did not do that because we had that surge. And so we will err on the side of not doing something to make sure that our kids are safe. But the other thing coming from a registration side on my end is I say register. So even if you don't know what's happening, and this is more so for incoming students. So this is our registration season right now. We start in January and we end what we call a priority season. We ended in April. And essentially we do it based off of different rounds where we're giving assignments to students in 2 different groups for 2 different grade levels. And what happens is a lot of families wait to register. So we have a register. Yes, you can come in at any time, but a lot of families don't understand the impact of the timing that you come in to register. So the reason we call them priority is because for January, we register our lower grades, so like kindergarten, K0, K1, as well as transition grades, so like grade 6, grade 7, grade 9 for high school. And all of those students are put into this one round and we distribute seats, right? And then we go into our second round and do the same thing for all other grades. So essentially, by the end of May, those seats, we're not out of seats, but the highly sought after schools, all of these things, we're already assigning kids for next year. So after April, if you begin to come in, month by month, so it's April and May, and then the summer, and then the fall, though you're missing out on seats and the opportunity to get those. And so families don't really understand that. So we encourage families, my little plug, even if you're thinking about it, just register now. You're not obligated to any seat, but it allows you to understand what school your child may be going to. And as we progress around the reopening, then you can make more informed decisions, if you want to say, around, what decisions when it comes to hybrid or remote or just in-person learning altogether.
Wow. So the impact is, clearly they got to be early. And the later they are, the more at risk of not probably getting the type of school that you want your child to be in. What's the big risk? They're going to be placed, I imagine, but what's the bigger risk?
I think you hit it on the nail. It's based off of the schools that you're interested. There's schools that are highly sought after. And because the other caveat is we do home-based assignment. So you receive your own choice list. So you can't, unless you're high school, which we call citywide, you can't just apply to any school. So it's the schools that are in your neighborhood. And we, have our little formula that's based off of like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 schools. It's within that 1 mile of the radius of your home, etc. So if you are seeking after particular schools in your neighborhood, and so are all the other families in your neighborhood, we don't guarantee seats, but we do tell families the earlier you register, there's a more of a likelihood of you getting that seat versus later. So on a small scale, if you think of it as like we have 100 seats, right? We have 100 openings right now, and families come in and we just gave away 50 seats. And now you come in the summer, now you only have 50 seats, but you still have a pool of people who are coming in. And then those seats begin to decrease as we continue to assign, because we have a rolling registration. So we never stop registering families, but we do emphasize coming in the first part of the year in regards to getting school assignments for the upcoming school year.
Wow. And does that include how exam schools work? And maybe people don't understand how exam schools work.
So that's actually a little different. Essentially, exam schools, we in the past have had an entrance exam. So students would take an exam to get into the school based off of your grades, and then you would be into the process, which actually does take place normally in January for those assignments and invitations to come out in like the March timeframe. Given the pandemic, there are some effects of it on us. And one of the reasons we've had to kind of shift some of our policies is because at the time, there was not a secure way or a safe way to do any type of in-person testing. So that was out the window. And then there was no secure way to really do remote testing because you never know what's happening behind the screen, et cetera. So because of that, they actually paused for this year the entrance exam. So right now it is based off of GPAs, and it will, in regards to the invitation process, there'll be 20% given to students for their GPA citywide. So kind of like the top GPAs within the city, and then the remaining 80% will be allocated via zip code.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like a game changer.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's been an interesting process in trying to implement that, but we've just, when it came to testing, at the time, we just could not do that. So you had to be creative and think about what that looks like for students. So for the upcoming year.
Wow. So as time has, you know, that 1 year, which was, you know, COVID through the process has really kind of made us do things a lot different. What do you see different happening as it relates to, you know, placement, registration, how this whole process, and what has it done to the system that you might say, hey, this is going to be different?
Yeah, so I think the biggest difference, we've been updated. So one of the things, our centers actually, 3 of them reopened on March 1st. So we opened up the locations in East Boston, Dorchester, and Roslindale. And essentially we're appointment only, and we'll be that way for a while until we understand, you know, shifts that will take place. So that's one difference, is you used to be able to just walk into the building and, you know, sit there and wait and get an appointment, or at least get service, versus now, like all of the stores, there's capacity limits and all of that. So for us, you have to have an appointment, even for in-person services. So really assessing what does that look like as we kind of enter into the other side of this. Like I said, we returned back to work. And so one of the other differences, which is beneficial, is we're gonna maintain the remote aspect of our work. So whether we are, you know, at home or whether we're actually in the centers, we will still be offering like phone services to families. We're working on potentially upgrading our system so that we can accept online. Right now, we can do partial of parents' appointments online, but you do have to continue the second half of that with a, so instead of just in-person services, families will be able to have, you know, have their appointments with us, so you don't have to come in. And I think it's been very beneficial. Like, parents have loved it. And the truth is, even though we've opened up, we're keeping record right now of our appointments, but honestly, we have people who will make in-person appointments and then call us the day of their appointment and say, I think I want to stay at home. You know, people are still feeling a little uneasy and uncomfortable with reopening just around the, you know, the city and the state, just with everything going on. So we definitely want to make sure that we're maintaining these services. So I think that would be the biggest change for families, is not having to come into a welcome center physically to register their child.
Wow. Again, it seems like there's a lot of wheels that are turning, and COVID-19 has definitely made a lot of things that have to be done sometimes a little bit more complex. So how's your staff? You know, as you're directing all your people and overseeing and directing these different welcome centers, how's your staff doing?
They're tired. They're doing okay. They have been very agile, very flexible. I've definitely appreciated them because we've just been in a fluid time. So just the adjustment, you know, people ask questions and I'm like, I don't know, y'all. Like, it's just, so we make sure that we stay in communication. You know, this year has definitely been a different feel. You know, you respect that, like so many other people, staff's at home, their spouses are home, their children are home with them. And so, you know, trying to stay in contact with them and just check on them, because work looks different, you know, when you have your kids running around the house, your little ones, and you're on the phone trying to get work done. So we've been, you know, flexible around scheduling and really just everything with everything that's going on. We're really just trying to help them out. But I know that since we have reopened, we've definitely had some families or some staff who are so excited to be back in the welcome centers. And then some of them who are, you know, just like, I can get used to working at home. I don't know exactly what that looks like going into the future, but you know, we're adjusting right now with scheduling, and everyone's in the office about 2 days a week on a rotating schedule. So they're okay right now, just tight.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and that makes a lot of work for you. So I always ask this question of my guests in relationship to their work and their faith. So how does your faith help you to get through these difficult times during the COVID period?
Oh, my faith has played a huge role. The statement when they say, if only the grace of God has kept my mind. No, I mean, just really, yeah, I mean, just being prayerful, and just maintaining my own self, and really just spiritually, I feel like I've become stronger with having to pray and seek wisdom and guidance and discernment on how I provide direction for my staff, how I support them. So it's on one side, personally, you know, keeping me, sustaining me, but on the other side, really having to dig deep on how we just really help and support our families who, you know, we have homeless families, we have people who are going through things. And so just having the wisdom to really navigate those situations and how to support families as well as staff.
Wow. And how are you doing that now? You come through this COVID. What's been the biggest challenge that you had? The big, kind of like one of the big mountains that you had to climb during this time of the COVID season?
I mean, I would say probably the top two. The first one, of course, is the transition, like I said earlier, with our systems and just what we've had, having to navigate a new process with old ways, old equipment and different things. But we've been able to solve that and really help staff to get things updated on our end so that we could better service families. And then I would say all of the moving pieces. We, of course, and it's not the responsibility of a family to know what's happening in the background, but really trying to provide the best service for families while understanding all of the moving parts that are happening. So, you know, families sometimes get a little frustrated with timing and us not necessarily having answers right away, but it's all a learning curve for us, and really wanting to make sure that we do things right and we do them well. So I think those have been the biggest challenges of just really trying to service our families in the best way possible, knowing their frustration and everything that they're going through at times, and then doing it well through just the equipment and the things that we need to work from home, work remotely, to be efficient and effective in the work that we do.
Wow. Well, I commend you for the work that you're doing, and it sounds like a mammoth responsibility to work with our families and our children and to help really to educate them that they're our future. And we want to make sure that we're doing all we can in the public school system to reach our children and to make sure that they're well equipped as they matriculate through to become working and citizens. And want to make sure that you know that we appreciate you coming tonight to be our guest on BLAW Live. Well, for those of you here, we've expired our time, and I pray that this discussion that we had with Minister Devon McCarley has been a blessing to you. And so just a reminder that, you know, if this has been a blessing to you, share it with somebody, subscribe to the YouTube channel. We thank you so much for being a supporter. And so until next time, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause his face on you. May the Lord be gracious unto you and give you his shalom, his peace. Nothing missing, nothing broken. God bless you. Have a good evening.